Hello folks, welcome back to Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode number 38, and we are returning to Downey Games Fast Action Racing for the 1991 Stock Car Project. We're up to race number 4, which took place at Atlanta on March 18th, 1991. On that day, Ken Schrader won the race. It was the Motorcraft 500. Just real quickly here, we'll take a look at the current standings of our replay after 3 races. You can see Rick Mast, with his consistent performance in the 3 races, is in first, and he's followed by Kyle Petty and the rest of the pack going down that way. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is take the driver cards, give them a shuffle and a cut, and we'll set the grid. All right. And remember, this grid is not a representation of position on the track. It is just the, really only comes into play at the end of the race. It's supposed to represent different grooves on the track. So here we go. We got Morgan Shepherd, who was the race winner last race. Derek Cope, Ernie Irvin, Mickey Gibbs, Rick Mast, current point leader, Davey Allison, Mark Martin, Rusty Wallace, Michael Waltrip, Alan Kulwicki, Ricky Rudd, Darrell Waltrip, Richard Petty, Joe Rootman, Bobby Hillen Jr., Harry Gant, Sterling Marlin, Hut Strickland, Bill Elliott, Jeff Bodine, Chad Little, Terry Labonte, Stanley Smith, Dale Earnhardt, Dale Jarrett, Larry Pearson, Ted Musgrave, Jimmy Spencer, Rick Wilson, Ken Schrader, Kyle Petty, Jimmy Means, Lake Speed, Dave Marcus, Brett Bodine, and last but not least, Bobby Hamilton. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take 2 dice, and I ought to mention before we race, there are no contact avoidance or mechanical problem avoidances modifiers at Atlanta, so I guess this would be considered a neutral track. So we're going to roll the red and white die, reading the red die first to determine who our pole sitter is, and that is a 41. So we'll have to search for a 41 here. And that is Alan Kulwicki, who I believe was the pole sitter in the actual race on March 18th, 1991. So we got Kulwicki in the pole. And he's going to bring the field out. He's going to face a challenge right off the bat. And for this first challenge only, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous races, the pole sitter gets a +1. All right, so we're going to randomly determine who challenges him. And that is a 52, and that is Bobby Hillen Jr. And you have to excuse me because there is some bookkeeping to do in this game. All right, so let me get my leader marker, and we'll put that on Alan Kulwicki for right now. Okay, so he's facing a challenge from Bobby Hillen Jr. Bobby Hillen Jr. is a 10. Alan Kulwicki is an 11. He gets a +1 for this first challenge. That means he is a 12. So Hillen's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12 to be successful. And he rolls a 5. So Hillen fails the challenge. And Alan Kulwicki is your race leader early on in this event. Okay, so the next phase is a check for any mechanical problems. We'll select a random driver using the red and white die and the 4 adjacent drivers to that random driver. And that is a 22, and that's Dale Earnhardt. Or no, excuse me. It's Mickey Gibbs. All right, so it's going to be Mickey Gibbs. 12 o'clock is Stanley Smith. 3 o'clock is Dale Jarrett. 6 o'clock is Terry Labonte. And 9 o'clock is Bill Elliott. Okay, so we're going to roll the black die. And if the die is equal to the mechanical rating, it gets a red lap marker. That means you had a mechanical issue, had to come into the pits, probably ended up behind the wall and is many laps down. And if the die roll is greater than the mechanical rating, the driver is forced to retire. So first up is Mickey Gibbs, and we're looking at the red number. So he needs less than a 7. And he rolls an 8. So that means he's forced to retire. So Mickey Gibbs is out of the race already due to a mechanical issue. The game does have provisions to determine what all the mechanical problems are and things like that, but I'm not getting that detailed into my replay. All right, so Mickey Gibbs is out. Next up is Stanley Smith. He is a 6. He needs less than a 6. He rolls a 7 and he's out. All right. Dale Jarrett. Dale Jarrett has an 8. He needs less than an 8. He rolls a 5, so he's safe. So he's forced to retire. Jarrett's safe. Next is Terry Labonte. Terry Labonte is a 5. He rolls a 10, and he's also forced to retire. And last is Bill Elliott. He is a 9, and he rolls a 9. That was a 5, so he rolls a 9. He does have some mechanical issues, but is able to come back out. But he is many laps down and more than likely out of contention. So Labonte failed, and Elliott's lapped. And Alan Kulwicki is still your race leader. Okay, now he's going to face another challenge. So we'll determine that with the red and white die. We have a 3, 4. That's Larry Pearson. Pearson's challenging race leader Alan Kulwicki. Okay, and we're looking at the green ratings. Well, Larry Pearson's a 2. Alan Kulwicki's an 11. That's a -9, and that's less than a -5, so he is automatically down a lap. So that's a fail, and Kulwicki remains your race leader. Okay, now we're going to have a period of green flag racing. The way that works is we're going to select a random driver for adjacent, and they're all going to go up against the leader looking at the green race rating. So we have a 5, 6, that's Lake Speed. It's going to be Lake Speed. His 12 o'clock comes down here to Richard Petty. His 3 o'clock is Hutch Strickland. His 6 o'clock is Bobby Hillen Jr. And his 9 o'clock is Darrell Waltrip. Okay, so they're all going to go up against race leader Alan Kulwicki. First will be Lake Speed. Lake Speed is a 6. Alan Kulwicki is an 11. That's a -5. That's an automatic failure, but he remains on the lead lap. That's a fail. Kulwicki remains race leader. Okay, next is Richard Petty. Richard Petty's an 8. Alan Kulwicki's an 11. He's challenging at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He rolls a 10, and we have a new race leader in Richard Petty. So he passes, and he's the new race leader. Okay, the remaining challenges will come up against Richard Petty. Next up is Hutch Strickland. He's an 11. Richard Petty is an 8. He's challenging at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12. And he rolls a 7. So we have another new leader in Hutch Strickland. This is all green flag racing going on. So Strickland's a new race leader. He's going to face a challenge from Bobby Hillen Jr. Bobby Hillen Jr. is a 10. Hut Strickland's an 11. The challenge is at -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Strickland remains the race leader. And lastly, it will be Darrell Waltrip. They're both 11s. So this is a challenge at a 0. Waltrip needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 6 and fails. So Hut Strickland is your race leader after the green flag racing. Okay, now we're going to have a series of green flag pit stops where you can have a lot of lead changes. You know, different cars coming in, different laps, and that's what this is supposed to represent. And what we're going to do is we're going to select a random driver and 4 adjacent, and they'll go up against the leader, and we'll use the matrix. All right, so we need a red and white die. We have a 2-1, and a 2-1 is Davey Alice, or no, excuse me, a 2-1 is down here. That's somebody who's out of the race. And we'll roll again. We got a 5-1, and that's Richard Petty. So, be Richard Petty. His 12 o'clock is his son, Kyle. His 3 o'clock is Dave Marcus. His 6 o'clock goes up to Lake Speed. And his 9 o'clock is Jimmy Spencer. Okay, so we're looking at the blue pit ratings on this challenge. Hut Strickland, they're all going up against Hut Strickland, at least for now. Hut Strickland is an 8. His first challenge is coming from Richard Petty. He's also an 8. That means he's challenging at a 0. Petty needs a 7 to 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails. Hut Strickland remains the leader. Next is Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty's a 10. Hut Strickland's an 8. Kyle's challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. He rolls a 6 and is successful. And Kyle Petty is now the race leader. So we'll move that marker down to Kyle. And he's going to face a challenge from Dave Marcus. Dave Marcus is a 7. Kyle Petty's a 10. He's challenging at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. Rolls a 7 and fails. Kyle Petty remains the leader. Next challenge comes from Lake Speed. He is a 6. Petty is a 10. That's a -4. He needs an 11 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. And it's still Kyle Petty. And last but not least, it's Jimmy Spencer. He is a 7. Kyle Petty is a 10. He's challenging at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He rolls an 11, and we have a new race leader in the pride of Berwick, PA, Jimmy Spencer. So he's going to get a bonus point for that. Maybe it'll get him out of the cellar, which is where he is right now. Okay, the next phase is a penalty check, where we're going to check to see if there were any infractions during these pit stops. And the way that works is 4 a random driver and 4 adjacent versus a pit crew rating. So this may or may not involve the leader. So we're going to select our random driver, and it's an 11. That's Morgan Shepard. So it'll be Shepard. And his 12 o'clock is Bill Elliott, and Bill Elliott's going to be forced to retire, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, and his 3 o'clock is Mark Martin. 6 o'clock goes up to Chad Little. And his 9 o'clock goes over to Dave Marcus. Okay, so we are checking against the pit crew rating, which is the blue number. The dice has to be lower or equal to his pit rating. If it's higher than that, he's forced to come in for a stop and go, and he'll go a lap down and get a green lap marker. Green lap markers mean you can still challenge to get back on the lead lap. All right, so Morgan Shepherd needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 12 and fails. So he's forced to come in for a stop and go, and he's a lap down. Next is Bill Elliott. Now, the rules state that if you have a yellow or a red lap marker and are selected in this phase, you are black flagged and forced to retire. So unfortunately for Bill Elliott, he is out of the race. Fail and a black flag. Next is Mark Martin. Where is Mark Martin? Right here. He is an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls it a 9. So he fails and goes a lap down. He's forced to come in for a stop and go, and he goes a lap down as well. Chad Little, he is a 7, so he needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 9 and he goes a lap down. A lot of infractions during this series of pit stops. And last is Dave Marcus. He's a 7, needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 10 and also goes a lap down. So we had some serious infractions during those pit stops. And Jimmy Spencer remains your race leader. And he's going to face a challenge. And we've used the red and white die. Have a 5-5. That's Bobby Hillen Jr. Okay, Bobby Hillen is a 10. Jimmy Spencer is an 8, so he's challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 7, and we have a new race leader in Lake Speed. Now this is the portion of a race, or excuse me, not Lake Speed, Bobby Hillen. I apologize for that. This is the portion of the race where there are 2 challenges back to back. So Hillen's the new leader, and he's also going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 1-4 Jeff Bodine. All right, Jeff Bodine is an 11. Bobby Hillen is a 10. He's challenging at a +1. Bodine needs a 6 to 12. He rolls a 7, and we have a new race leader in Jeff Bodine. Okay, next phase is a check for any contact. We're going to select the driver randomly and 4 adjacent, and we'll go from there. We have a 5-6. That's Lake Speed. His 12 o'clock would be Richard Petty. His 3 o'clock would be Hut Strickland. 6 o'clock, Bobby Hillen Jr. And his 9 o'clock, Darrell Waltrip. Okay, so what we do during this phase, there's no track modification here at Atlanta. So we look at the yellow contact avoidance rating, okay? And you need the die roll to be lower than the contact avoidance number. If it's equal to, you've been rubbed or have had some contact and you've gone several laps down, and we'll get a yellow lap marker. If the die is greater than that rating, it's some serious contact and the driver's forced to retire. Okay, so first up we have Lake Speed. His is a 7. He needs less than a 7 to stay in. He rolls a 10. He's forced to retire. So Speed's out. Fail. Did not finish. Next is Richard Petty. He is a 5. He needs less than a 5 to avoid this. He rolls a 4 and he's safe. So he passes. But Strickland is a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 7. He's not forced to retire, but he goes down several laps due to some contact he was involved in. So he failed, and is a yellow lap marker. And Bobby Hillin Jr., he's an 11. So he needs a 10 or less, and he rolls an 11, unfortunately for him. So he gets a yellow lap marker. That means he's down several laps. Possibly him and Strickland got tangled up. So it failed, yellow lapped. And lastly, be Darrell Waltrip. His number is an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 6, so he's safe. All right. Passed. And Jeff Bodine is still the race leader. Okay, now we're going to have a series of pit stops under caution. And this will be the race leader and his adjacent cars plus one random driver. So it's going to be Jeff Bodine. His 3 o'clock is Ernie Irvan. Or excuse me, his 12 o'clock is Ernie Irvan. His 3 o'clock is Rick Mast. His 6 o'clock is Derek Cope. And we go over here for his 9 o'clock, and that's Sterling Marlin. Okay, so we use the matrix for this. Oh, I have to select a random driver as well. And that is a 5-1. It's Richard Petty. All right. So it's Richard Petty. And these are all going up against the current leader, Jeff Bodine, unless someone, takes the lead from Jeff Bodine. Okay, so the first one up is Ernie Irvan. And we are looking at the yellow pit rating. Ernie Irvan is a 6. Jeff Bodine is a 9. That's a -3. Irvan needs a 10 to 12. He rolls a 3 and fails. So he fails. Bodine's still the leader. Next up is Rick Mast. Rick Mast is a 9. Bodine is a 9. That's a 0. Mast needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7, and Rick Mast takes the lead. That's a pass. Rick Mast is the new race leader. Next is Derek Cope. He's a 5. Rick Mast is a 9. That's a -4. He needs an 11 or 12 to be successful. He rolls an 8 and fails. Sterling Marlin is next. He is a 10. Rick Mast is a 9. He's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. And he rolls snake eyes. Rick Mast remains the race leader. And lastly, Richard Petty is a 5. That's a -4 going up against Mast. He needs an 11 to 12. Ooh, almost. He rolls a 10, but is unsuccessful and fails. And Rick Mast, points leader, Rick Mast is the new race leader. Okay, so he's going to face a challenge. Of course, we do that using the red and white die, and that is a 1-4, and that's Jeff Bodine. All right. So Jeff Bodine is an 11. Rick Mast is a 9. Jeff Bodine is challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. He rolls an 11 and is successful, and he's got the lead again. All right, so that was a pass. And Jeff Bodine is once again the race leader. All right, now we need to check if there's going to be a mechanical issue, and this is just the race leader. Okay, so here at Atlanta, mechanical is a 7 to 12, and we roll a 7, so that means there is going to be a mechanical check. So Jeff Bodine has to do a mechanical check against his red mechanical number. If it's equal to his number, he ends up going down several laps. If it's greater than, he's forced to retire, and then we'll determine who the new leader is. All right, so 6. He needs less than a 6. Yes. He rolls a 6. So unfortunately, Jeff Bodine fails that challenge. And he gets in some sort of mechanical trouble. And is forced to retire from the race. So we take, going by the 4 adjacent riders going by order of priority. Ernie Irvin is an 11, Rick Mast a 9, Derek Cope's a 7, Sterling Marlin's an 11, but Ernie Irvin has the priority being at 12 o'clock, so we have a new race leader in Ernie Irvin. Okay, and now he's going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 44. 44 is Ricky Rudd. All right, Ricky Rudd's an 11, Ernie Irvin's an 11. This is a challenge at 0. Rudd needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7, and he is the new race leader. A lot of lead changes this race. Okay, so that was a pass, and Rudd is the race leader. All right, now we need to see if there's any, we're into the closing phase here now, and we were into the closing phase with that mechanical check, but now we need to determine if there's going to be a contact check, and contact here is a 9 to 12 at Atlanta. Here in these closing phases, we roll a 7, so there's no contact check. So that's NA. There's no pit stops under caution because we didn't have any contact. And now Ricky Rudd's going to face another challenge. And that's coming from 63, Brett Bodine. All right. Brett Bodine's a 9. Ricky Rudd is an 11. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls an 11, and we have a new race leader in Brett Bodine. That's a pass. And Brett Bodine is the new race leader. Okay, now we need to see if there's a pit crew check under caution. That's an 8 to 12. We roll a 10, so yes, there is. So it's yes, and that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The adjacent cars to the leader, Brett Bodine, and 1 random driver. So it'll be Sterling Marlin, uh, 3 o'clock would be Derek Cope, 6 o'clock, Harry Gant. And 9 o'clock, Joe Rootman. And 1 random driver, who will be 13, 1, 3. Well, Derek Cope's already involved in this, so we'll roll again. 2, 3, there's nobody there. 1, 3 again. 3, 4, Larry Pearson. Now he's only down a lap. He can be involved in this. Or wait a minute, I have to double check that. No. Yes, he can be involved in this and possibly get his lap back. So that is Larry Pearson. Well, I guess he can't get his lap back. All he can do is stay 1 lap down. Okay. So we are looking at the blue pit rating, and we're checking the matrix, and that's how we're doing this, okay? And or no, excuse me. Yes, that's what we're doing. Oh, you know what? No, we don't have to do this because the pits under caution did not take place. So this is NA. I apologize for that. Yeah, I just got a little confused there. Yeah, we don't need to do a, you know, penalty check in the pits if there hasn't been a pit stop. Okay, so now we got to check one more thing, a last possibility for some green flag racing. And on a 6 to 12, there will be some green flag racing. And we roll a 9, and that's a yes. So it's going to be some green flag racing. That's Brett Bodine, still leading. So this is going to be, this is kind of near the end of the race. So things are, you know, kind of settling around Brett Bodine and the cars around him. So this is going to be just like the last phase, which we didn't do. It would be the adjacent cars to Brett Bodine and one random. So it'll be Sterling Marlin at 12. Derek Cope at 3. Harry Gant at 9. And Joe Rootman. Oh, wait a minute. Marlin, Cope. Yes, Joe Rootman. And the random driver is 66. Hut Strickland. Well, he can't. He's several laps down. It can't be him. We'll roll again. That's a 53. Joe Rootman's already involved in this. Roll again. 54, Jimmy Means. Okay, so Sterling Marlin first. He's an 11. Brett Bodine's a 9. He's challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. He rolls a 9, and we have a new leader in Sterling Marlin. But we don't, Sterling Marlin will face the next challenge. So that's coming from Derek Cope. Derek Cope's a 7. Marlin's an 11. That's a -4. He needs an 11 to 12. He rolls a 6 and fails. So Marlin remains the leader. Next is Harry Gant. Harry Gant is an 11. Marlin's an 11. That's a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 3 and fails. Joe Rootman is a 9. Sterling Marlin's an 11. It's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. And the final challenge is coming from Jimmy Means. He's a 2. Sterling Marlin's an 11. That's a -9. And he wasn't challenging for the lead. He was challenging to try to stay on the lead lap. So he goes down a lap, fails. Now, the final challenge is the highest ranked driver utilizing the rules of priority adjacent to the leader. Okay, so we have a 10 in Bobby Hamilton, a 9 in Rick Mast, a 9 in Brett Bodine, and an 11, can't be lapped, an 11 in Ricky Rudd. So the challenge is going to come from Ricky Rudd. So they're coming down the last few laps, and it's Rudd and Sterling Marlin vying for the lead. They're both 11s. This is going to be at a 0. So Ricky Rudd needs a 7 to 12 to pass Sterling Marlin and take the lead. He does not. He fails. Sterling Marlin holds him off, and he is your race winner. Race number 4, the Motorcraft 500 in Atlanta. Winner is Sterling Marlin. Okay, so we're going to take him off the board. We'll leave this marker there. So he finishes first, of course. The driver who loses that last challenge finishes second. The other drivers that had a opportunity to be part of this, they will finished based on priority. So it's going to be Bobby Hamilton, Brett Bodine, and Rick Mast. All right. So now we're on this, what they call the bottom groove. That's where Sterling Marlin was. So we're going to go around clockwise and pull off the drivers based on their rating. So it'll be Harry Gant, Mark Martin's lapped, Ernie Irvan, Davey Allison, Darrell Waltrip, Hutch Strickland's lapped. Okay, that was the 11s. So now we'll look for 10s. No 10s, 9s. No 9s. 8s. It's Richard Petty. Jimmy Spencer. Lapped. Ted Musgrave. Then we go to 7s. Derek Cope. Everybody else on that groove is lapped. Okay, so now we move over to the adjacent groove and we go clockwise. We'll start here at Jimmy Means. Well, he's lapped, so it's Kyle Petty's an 11. It's going to be Petty, Kowicki, Rusty Wallace, Michael Waltrip, Ken Schrader, and that's it for the 11s. 10 would be Dale Jarrett. Oh no, excuse me, I missed Dale Earnhardt finished before Ken Schrader. And then it's Dale Jarrett. Okay. Dale Jarrett, he's a 10. No other 10, so then it would be Joe Rootman. Everybody else is lapped here. Then we go into this top groove. It would be Rick Wilson. And now we go back out to the bottom groove where the race winner was, and we look for the highest rated lap drivers. So that would be Mark Martin, Morgan Shepherd, green, all right, Chad Little, Dave Marcus, and they're still, that's all the green. So we move into here, it's Jimmy Means. Okay, and then Larry Pearson. All right, so we go back out to the bottom groove. It's Hutch Strickland and Bobby Hillen. And then Jeff Bodine. And the drivers who retired earlier in the race, they go on the bottom. So here at Atlanta, race number 4 in our 1991 stock car replay, here's your top 10. Winner is Sterling Marlin, Ricky Rudd, Bobby Hamilton, Brett Bodine, Rick Mast, Harry Gant, Ernie Irvan, Davey Allison, Darrell Waltrip, and Richard Petty. So Rick Mast continues his consistent racing early on here. He finishes in the top 5 again. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks for your patience. And I'll be back again in the future, in the near future, with another episode. And until then, take care.